What up, guys? It's your boy Quake, and Eminem has finally released his 9th studio album, Revival, and there's a lot to say about this. I'm not going to talk about whether I like this album or I dislike this album. I've already voiced my opinion on social media. If you follow me on Twitter, you know my stance on this album. What I am here to talk about is the content on this album, because that's one thing you cannot overlook when it comes to Eminem. He can always deliver the right content. As far as the other aspects of this album, that's left up for debate. Eminem has always talked about insane things on his albums, from his ex-wife to his mom to political things. Back in the 2004 in White America, he talked about George Bush. And on this album, it's really nothing different. It's the same thing, just a more mature Eminem. Right now, he's talking about the problems in America when it comes to black people and white people. He's talking about Donald Trump. He's talking about his ex-wife still. He's talking about his daughter Haley still. And he's talking about his best friend Proof that passed. And I'm going to explore all those things. First, let's talk about his shots at Donald Trump. He takes various shots at Donald Trump on this album, which was expected because if you heard the October 2017 freestyle, the BET Hip Hop Awards, he's clearly going at Donald Trump. The whole freestyle was dedicated towards him. So, of course, we were expecting this. I mean, when the album cover came out and we saw the American flag with his head sort of in shame, I was expecting it completely. And then when I heard the Untouchable track that came out before the album came out, then I knew what to expect somewhat. Now, there are various tracks going at Donald Trump on this album. On some tracks, he's taking shots at him just with a couple of lines, not with a whole verse. Like on the track Framed, he talks about how he has Ivanka Trump in the back of his trunk. So he has a couple of lines going at Donald Trump's kids, going at Donald Trump himself. But on the track Like Home with Alicia Keys, he dedicates the whole song taking shots at Donald Trump. On the track Like Home, it's interesting because it's an anthem in favor of the United States of America. It's a critical yet patriotic counter argument to President Trump's vision of the country. Like on the hook, Eminem and Alicia Keys firmly worship their home country, which is America, of course, while in the verses, Eminem takes direct shots at Donald Trump. So let's get into the first verse. He starts it off by saying, "Someone get this Aryan a sheet, time to bury him, so tell him to prepare to get impeached." So Aryan is a term used by Nazis to describe whites of non-Jewish descent who had neurotic features like blonde hair and blue eyes. Because Trump, who is currently president of the United States, has some controversies regarding his anti-Semitism, Eminem is using the now frowned upon word to describe Trump. And then he says, time to bury him, so tell him to prepare to get impeached. So that's very clear. I mean, he's just saying to get rid of him and get him out of the White House. Then he continues saying, everybody on your feet. This is where terrorism and heroism meets. Square off in the streets. This chump barely even sleeps. All he does is watch Fox News like a parrot and repeats. These lines are pretty clear. I mean, he's just saying, everybody get on your feet. Go ahead and protest, about Donald Trump being president. Let your voice be heard in the streets. He then talks about how Donald Trump, all he does is watch Fox News and repeats whatever Fox News says. He doesn't watch any other channel, and he stays up all night just watching Fox News. He's a canary with a beak. So that's pretty funny. That line was kind of hilarious to me. And then he goes on to say, why you think he banned transgenders from the military with a tweet? He's trying to divide us. The shit's like a cult, but like Johnny Hill, you only unite us. The first few lines are easy to tell. I mean, Donald Trump tweeted about how he wanted to ban transgenders, but it never went through. And then the last line where he says the shit's like a cult, but like Johnny Hill, you only unite us. It's a dope wordplay. If you don't know what he means when he says Johnny, he's using it in reference to the former Colts quarterback, Johnny Unitas. And I thought that was a dope reference that probably is going to go over a lot of people's heads. But that's why I wanted to mention it in this video, because it was just a dope line. Now I'm going to skip to the second verse and the start of it. He says, didn't want to piss off your base, huh, did ya? Can't denounce the Klan because they play golf with ya. You stay on Twitter, way to get your hate off, Nazi. I do not see a way y'all differ. And he continues saying, and all you got are race cards. Better get the swastika with your name carved in it. Should be your trademark. Because hate's all you played off and you just licked the plate off. So I guess it pays to feed off of chaos. So basically, you're Adolf Hitler. So, I mean, this is as clear as it gets. Donald Trump, even though he's voiced going against the KKK sometimes, he hasn't really had any differences with the KKK, because the KKK still supported him regardless of him saying this. So clearly it says something in the underline that, hey, something's going on behind the scenes that the world isn't seeing with Donald Trump and the KKK. And he says he's basically just using fuel, from the hate of the KKK, from racist people, to become what he's become. And because he's doing that, he's Adolf Hitler. But it continues saying, but you ain't running our country, punk, or taking our pride from us. You won't define us, because like a dictionary, things are looking up. And I thought that last line, because like a dictionary, things are looking up, was pretty dope, because, on a dictionary, you look up words. So that was pretty dope that when I was hearing the song, I kind of missed. So now that I'm reading it, it makes sense. He continues saying, so much, got a sprained neck. No, we would rise up against this train wreck and take a stand, even if it meant sitting when they raised the flag. So, of course, this is reference to the NFL and the NFL players taking a knee whenever the national anthem comes up. And he says we can take a stand by sitting. So that's just a, wordplay. Taking a stand in this case literally means sitting. So he touched on various things on this track. And I'm going to skip a few lines and get to this part where, if you guys remember, in 2004, when Eminem was promoting his album Encore, Eminem had this sort of fake presidential run at the MTV Shady National Convention in 2004. And ironically, Donald Trump was brought in to introduce Eminem and endorsed him, and as well promised Eminem his vote for the election.
I know a winner when I see one. And Donald Trump is telling you right now, Slim Shady is a winner.
So Eminem finally speaks on this, and he says in a few lines, he says, take it back to the Shady National Convention. Wish I would have spit on it before I went to shake his hand at the event, or maybe had the wherewithal to know that he was going to try to tear apart our sacred land we cherish and stand for. So like I said, it was interesting for him to speak on this finally, because he never talked about it really in interviews. So he just basically said, hey, I wish I would have never brought him out like that. I wish he would have never been at that event. I would have spit in his hand. I should have spit in his hand is what he's saying. And it was just an overall bad decision. And he wishes he would have knew Donald Trump would have been this racist of a person, or else he would have never brought him out. Okay, so enough about Donald Trump. Let's get into Eminem and him talking about his ex-wife, Kim. On the song Remind Me, I'm not really going to go into that too much because it's pretty simple. Remind Me, he's basically exploring when times were simpler, when they were in love, and when they didn't have to really worry about anything. Remind Me ties with Bad Husband. So I'm going to get into Bad Husband more. Remind Me is just simple as that. Is just they're just early on in their relationship, and he explores that. Bad Husband is more interesting to me because this is the first time Eminem directly apologizes to his ex-wife, Kim Mathers. And the title basically describes Eminem and how he feels about himself. He feels like he's been a bad husband. This track is also sort of an explanation and sort of an apology to Haley, his daughter, who, Kim is her mother and Eminem is her father. So clearly Haley's sort of like in a weird place. She doesn't know sometimes if Eminem really means what he says on these tracks, or if she should side with Eminem or side with her. So that's why on this track he sort of lets Haley know too that, hey, I made so many mistakes that I'm a bad husband. He apologizes for embarrassing Kim through her personal and public life. I mean, he's written a bunch of songs, about Kim and how much he hates her on songs like Kim. It's literally a song called Kim, 97, Bonnie and Clyde, and Puke, as well as a bunch of others. I mean, in 2013, if you remember, on the Marshall Mathers LP2 album, on the track Headlights, he basically apologized to his mom and saying that he would never perform Cleaning Out My Closet ever again. He apologizes, and says just like I don't know what I was thinking. And that's the same thing on this track. He's like, I was young, I was dumb, and I didn't know that these songs would last forever. You know, when you're young, you just do things, you know, sort of out of impulse and rage, and you don't really think about the future or how could it affect other people, and that's what he's saying throughout this track. So let's go over the lyrics. In the first verse, he says, "We never saw from each other's sides or eye to eye, just eye to eye, lie for lie, fight or flight. So much baggage we need a luggage rack, but we carry on with our public spats and our feuds. Back in the news, love taps when I dissed you like it was fun. Actually used to run back to the booth, jump back in the studio, gave you tongue lashing, then you laughed at a stomach tat with the tombstone. It was funny back in our youth, but then it wasn't after we knew that we were done and actually through. But if there's one fraction of truth, if it could be spun back, I would do so many different things because it was such a dumbass excuse." Like I was saying earlier, he's just talking about the many problems that they had and the fact that he would have public, you know, problems with her. And, you know, this would be all over the news when he was having custody battles with Haley, when Kim was having that one cocaine arrest in like 2004. He's talking about these things, and then he talks about his stomach tat. For those that don't know, he has a tattoo on his stomach with a headstone that has Kim inscribed on the headstone, and below it says "Rotten Pieces." He mentions this tattoo in the Superman track. If you guys heard the line, "Love that tattoo, what's that say, rotten pieces?" Oh, that's great. So he's always had this sort of hate towards Kim because of the problems that they both caused each other. He continues the verse saying, "You hit me once and that I would use to continue the pattern of abuse. Why did I punch back? Girls, your dad is a scumbag. I'm confused." So basically he's admitting that, you know, Kim punched him first and then he would abuse the hell out of her. And that's obvious. I mean, if you heard Kim, the actual song Kim, and the fact that he even had a blow-up doll on stage and embarrassed her and she almost committed suicide, this wouldn't be surprising to you. And then he sort of like looks at himself as like a third person. He says, "Girls, your dad is a scumbag," you know, and like, "I'm confused. Why are you with this guy?" So that's how he ends off that verse. So it was a very powerful verse. Now we're going in verse 2. I'm not going to go over the whole verse 2, but I'm going to go over some lines that I thought were important. He says, "I'll never forget when you came home and you held Haley. Day before you went to jail and daily. How do we wait for that mail lady or by the phone for mom to call? And I watched you pull yourself up and we decided on giving it one more try despite it all. You're my lightning rod when my sky gets dark. I'm your shiny rocks in that tiny box. When we tied the knot, we broke the knot. Every line we crossed, we were supposed to not." So basically he's saying, mentioning the part that I mentioned earlier about how she went to jail for cocaine possession in 2004 and how she was going in and out of jail and they were waiting. Haley was like waiting for her to call, waiting for a letter from her from prison. And they were both just waiting on what would happen. And then when she came back, they decided to give it one more try. And in 2006, I believe it was around 2006, they were back together for a very short amount of time. But then he goes on to say that, you know, "You're my lightning rod when my sky gets dark." You know, you're somebody that makes him feel secure in times of darkness when he's depressed. Now let's go to verse 3, and I'm going to go over the most important line to me. And this line is basically what inspired him to write this song. So it starts out like this: "When the dust settles, now in all the dirt, if I touch the rawest nerve, all I want is for us not to hurt. And it's been an exhaustive search to find the words, but I just heard Mockingbird and got the urge to jot some verses and thoughts. The purpose was not to stir up or open wounds. I've caused a few and so have you. Or argue whose fault it was, partly yours, partly mine, but really no one's. This is so tough, I'm getting choked up. Oh, fuck it, we both suck." These lines were interesting to me because it confirms where he got the inspiration to write this song. He was clearly listening to Mockingbird, felt some sort of way, probably got in his emotions and was like, you know what, it's time to apologize. It's time to make a public apology in my music, because Mockingbird is one of his most introspective songs ever. I mean, he goes over a lot of things in that song. So for him to listen to that song and then get inspired to write this song, I thought that was dope. I'm glad that he mentioned that in the track because I wanted to know why he wanted, you know, to write this song, where the inspiration came from. The fact that it came from himself, his older self, is pretty dope to me. Now I want to go over some other songs where he's talking about Proof, he's talking about Haley, and he's talking about Slim Shady. On the song In Your Head, one reason why I'm going over this is because he samples the Cranberries Zombies track, which I love. So that was a dope sample. This is probably one of my favorite tracks off the album. But on the track, he sort of kills Slim Shady and says that, Slim Shady is gone forever. He reflects about the regrets throughout his career, mainly on the track. But in particular, he appears to be frustrated with the fact that he made a Slim Shady persona, which is his alter ego. And basically, Slim Shady was someone who, his alter ego that would mix like real life situations and sort of fake scenarios. Like the best example would be Kim. He would talk about killing Kim, but then like the track would be real in a sense because that's his frustration towards Kim, So that's what Slim Shady would be, someone who would just create, random scenarios in his head that weren't real, but that also reflected real life situations. So the fact that on this song he was frustrated with Slim Shady worries me because we might not ever get another Slim Shady persona on any Eminem album in the future. And I kind of miss that. That's what a lot of people miss. So for example, on verse 2, he says, maybe I should have did a better job at separating shady and entertaining from real life. So he's basically, like I said earlier, just blaming himself for sort of bringing confusion to people, I guess. And, if you heard Eminem, you would know what's shady and then what's real life. But the fact that he mixed those two together on certain songs, he really regrets it. And he even talks to Haley on this track saying, I didn't mean to mention you, about like 80% of the stuff that I rapped about, I mentioned you on each song. And, he sort of like feels regret for bringing her in the spotlight. So I thought this track was, interesting because of these reasons. And, killing off Slim Shady on this track is interesting. And, if he ever drops another album, we'll see if that persona ever exists again. Now, on the song Castle, he's basically dedicating the whole song to Haley and his regret for bringing her in the spotlight, just like a little bit how he did on the previous track, In Your Head. But on this track, he explains it more in detail. I'm not really going to go over this track. I mean, if you listen to the track, it's pretty self-explanatory. On December 15th, Eminem did a radio interview on Shade 45, and he basically said, what he said about the track is this. He said, when Haley was about to be born, I would always write letters that I thought I would give to her just for her to have them or whatever. So I thought, let me start from the beginning. Castle takes place in 2009, which leads to Overdose and Christmas and her birthday, and me missing that. Me not being there with my kids for Christmas was tough. So this song basically just takes, like you said, place in 2009 when he overdosed, when he almost died. He wasn't there for Christmas. He wasn't there for Haley's birthday. So this track is sort of apologizing to Haley and explaining all these problems and why he did these things. Now let's talk about A Rose, which is the last track on the album. This track blew me away. This is probably one of my favorite tracks on the album. I only have a few favorite tracks on this album because I don't really like this album too much. I like the lyrical content, but the other stuff, the flow, tone of voice, production, all that lacks in me, which is a shame because this album has amazing lyrical content. I mean, the stories told on this album, the perspectives, the reflection, all that is amazing. And this track, A Rose, really highlights that. It's an introspective album closer, and Eminem details again how he nearly died in 2007 due to an overdose on pills. He catalogs his thought process and what could have been his dying moments. His mind floats to his daughters, his brother, his mother, and all their wonderful milestones that would have been missed had that been his final day on Earth. He also sees his late friend and close collaborator Proof in hallucinations. He's hallucinating seeing Proof on this track, which was dope to me. I mean, him and Proof, if you're an Eminem fan, you know that they've been really close. That's his best friend. Everything that he's been through musically and personally, Proof has been there with him. And then the interesting thing on this track is he continues the Castle track. After the 4-minute mark, the beat starts to switch to Castle, continuing the same theme of rewinding the tape, and Eminem this time gives thanks for the second chance that the nurses gave him. The nurses revived him. He was nearly dead. He also recaps on his discography since the incident, reminding the listeners that it happened 10 years ago and that he's released several albums since then. So on A Rose, in the beginning lines, This thing is crazy because he's literally explains how he's like hearing, the nurses say that, hey, they're going to have to unplug him. His liver and kidneys aren't functioning and all kinds of crazy shit. And that's just a scary situation to be in where you're almost dying and you can hear, people saying that this guy's about to die. So he says, if I could rewind time like a tape inside a boombox, one day for every pill or Percocet that I ate, cut down on the volume, I'd have heard everything. But death is turning so definite. Wait, they got me all hooked up to some machine. I love you, being, don't want you to know I was struggling. Feels like I'm underwater, submerged like a submarine. Just heard the nurse say my liver and kidneys aren't functioning. Been flirtatious with death, skirt chasing. I guess it's Avraderci. Same nurse, just heard say they're unplugging me. And these lines are insane. This is why Eminem is one of my favorite rappers, because he can explain, in great detail what was happening to him in a certain moment with amazing bars. Now, I'm going to skip a few lines because in these few lines, he's just talking about how he's not there for Christmas. Now to go to this line, he says, I go to make a fist, but I can't make one. I'm frozen stiff. I yell, but nothing comes out. I'm crying inside. I shout. My vocal cords won't permit me. I scream, but it's not allowed. You put your arm around mama to calm her. Wow. So he's talking about Haley. She should probably put her arm around, her mom to just calm her down. And then he says, I just thought about the aisle. I'll never get to walk us down. Never see you graduate in your caps and gowns. And it's about to be 2008. How is this happening now? I've got so much more to do. So he basically, in this moment of almost dying, he's thinking all these thoughts in his head, how he won't even see Haley graduate. He won't even be able to walk her down the aisle when she's getting married. So he's going through a bunch of emotions. And the fact that he paints this picture very well is amazing to me. Then he goes on to talk about proof. And he goes on after saying, I've got so much more to do. And proof, I'm truly sorry if I let you down. But this tore me in two. The thought of no more me and you. You gave me shoes, Nikes like new for me for school. Duty, I'm trying, but you were the glue that binded. So many things, time, I'd give anything to rewind it. I had to walk down my halls and constantly be reminded, but pictures all on my walls, and I couldn't sleep at night because the image burned in my brain of you on that table, me falling across your body, not be able to stand to save you. God, why did you take him? I'm trying to keep his legacy alive, but I'm dying. Where's Nathan? So these lines are very self-explanatory. Everywhere he goes, he hallucinates seeing proof. He looks at the pictures they had. He talks about when he visited the hospital and he was dying, he could not even stand on his own 2 feet when he was experiencing that. So he then goes on to talk about his brother and that, he wishes that, he gets married to the girl that he's talking to, in hopes that he becomes a better, parent than he was. He then even thanks his own father, saying that he learned a lot from him, that he taught him what not to do. And then he says, Mom, wish I'd had a chance to have one last heart-to-heart, honest and open talk with you. So I feel like, this near-death experience definitely made him want to apologize to all the people that, he's had broken relationships with. Of course, Headlights from Marshall Mathers LP2, and now this album with Bad Husband for Kim. As the track goes on, though, he basically explains he's about to die, and then it sort of reverses. And this is where we get part 2 of the Castle song. He says, I don't want it. I'll put out this last album, then I'm done with it. 100% finished, fed up with it. I'm hanging it up. Fuck it. And we've heard this from Eminem a few times, where in 2008 he was feeling very depressed, and that, he even mentioned, I believe on Relapse or on Recovery, he mentioned on a track, Talking to Myself, he was talking about how, he felt like he couldn't compete with Kanye and Lil Wayne. They're at the top of their game, and if he came back, nobody would care for him at all. So he's talked about this on various albums of him wanting to quit, and he's basically revisiting this and saying that, like, what, he came out with Relapse, came out with Recovery, came out with Marshall Mathers LP2, and that he got his victory lap. So this is basically the way the album ends out, and I felt like this was an amazing way to end this album out. I wish there was more tracks like this on the album that were produced like this. Like I said, what I was saying earlier, this album has amazing content in it, but the execution was bad. And of course, there's going to be people that disagree with me. There's going to be people that like this album. There's going to be people that hate this album, that don't even give it a chance, to review tracks. At least I gave it a chance and I didn't like it. That's fine. Eminem can release a bad album. He's human. So you Eminem stans are going to get in my comments and probably be like, oh, all you listen to is mumble rap. You don't know real hip hop and stuff like that. Get that stick out of your ass. It's okay for an artist to have a bad album. It happens. Every artist has that. There's times where just execution isn't right. Eminem is human. He's not God, like some of you stans get in the comments and go crazy over. I just had to say all this because the album is great, the content is great, but the overall execution of it was terrible. So with that being said, leave a comment below. Let me know what you guys think of this album. Of course, I just gave you guys my opinion, even though I said I wasn't going to in the beginning of this video. I just couldn't resist. I had to give you guys my opinion. So leave a comment below. Let me know what you guys think. If you're an Eminem fan, are you happy with this album? Are you disappointed with this album? Did you even know the context of some of these tracks that I explained to you guys? So leave a comment below. Let me know what you guys think. Like, share, and definitely subscribe. I do videos like this daily on hip-hop news, who changed the music industry, and much, much more. So definitely subscribe. Follow me on Twitter and on Instagram at QuakeGW. Like us on Facebook, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.